The village of Kibali lay nestled in the vast, arid expanse of Mali's interior, where the land stretched out in cracked, ochre-colored waves under the relentless sun. Life in Kibali was simple and rhythmic, defined by the rituals of planting, harvesting, and revering their ancient traditions. The villagers were bound together by these customs, believing that adherence to them kept their community in balance with the spirits of the land. Among these traditions, one stood paramount: the requirement that all young women remain untouched until marriage. This was a source of pride for the villagers, a testament to their purity and honor, passed down through generations. But before we dive deeper into this tale, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Make sure to turn on notifications so you won't miss the next exciting chapter. The young girls of Kibali grew up under the watchful eyes of their mothers and grandmothers, learning that their worth was tied to their purity. It was more than just a rule. It was a symbol of the village's identity, a sacred bond with their ancestors. Tales of those who upheld these customs were recited by firesides, weaving a tapestry of moral stories that kept the village's heart beating steady. But as the seasons passed, a creeping sense of unease settled over Kibali. The rains that should have come to nourish the fields failed. Crops withered in the harsh sun, their leaves curling and browning. Worse still, an inexplicable sickness began to spread among the villagers, claiming the frail and the strong alike. Day by day, the village weakened, and the once vibrant faces grew etched with worry. The elders of Kibali gathered in the village square, their faces grave as they discussed what could be done. They believed that the calamity befalling them was no mere chance of nature, but a curse. They spoke of balance, of spirits angered by some unseen transgression. With no other options, they decided to consult the village's oracle, a revered figure known for her deep connection with the spiritual world. She was their last hope to understand the darkness that had befallen them. The oracle, draped in robes that shimmered like the stars against her aged skin, sat cross-legged in her small hut filled with the smoke of burning herbs. She listened carefully to the elder's plight. Then, closing her eyes, she chanted in a language forgotten by most, seeking guidance from the spirits. After a long silence, her eyes snapped open, and her voice, trembling with age and fear, proclaimed that only a pure young woman could retrieve a blessed amulet from a sacred pot hidden deep within the village's forest. This amulet was the key to appeasing the spirits and ending the curse. A sacred test was devised, and the village's most virtuous girls were called upon to attempt the task. But one by one, each girl who reached into the sacred pot failed to retrieve the amulet. Whispers of fear spread like wildfire. Had all purity in Kibali been lost? The failure of the girls to retrieve the amulet sent ripples of panic through Kibali. How could none of the daughters of this honorable village succeed? The whispers grew louder, questioning the sanctity of the village's cherished customs. Was there a flaw hidden deep within their ranks? The elders, in their wisdom, knew that something more insidious must have taken root. The villagers' fear turned to desperation. Meetings were held daily in the village square, voices rising and falling like the dry wind that swept across the dusty paths. Each day without rain and each new case of sickness weighed heavily on the community's soul. People turned to the oracle again, begging for another chance or perhaps another solution. But the oracle was adamant. The spirits had spoken. Only a pure soul could break the curse. In their desperation, some villagers began to speculate. Perhaps someone had brought misfortune upon them from outside their tight-knit community. They looked to the road leading away from the village, wondering if the source of their troubles lay beyond their borders. And then, as if on cue, news spread that a woman had arrived from the bustling city of Bamako. It was then that they remembered Naira, the niece of an elderly villager. Naira had come to Kibali only a few weeks before. Her arrival had been a source of curiosity. She came from a different world, a place where traditions were less binding and where the old ways seemed like fading whispers. Naira's presence had sparked both fascination and unease, and it was now that the elders began to see her in a different light. Could her arrival have anything to do with the curse that gripped their home? Uncertain but feeling the weight of the village's despair, the elders turned their attention to this young woman from Bamako. They resolved to find her and learn what she knew, believing that the answers to their troubles might lie with her. Thus, they prepared to seek out Naira, unaware of the deeper upheavals her influence had already set in motion among the younger villagers. Naira stood out from the moment she set foot in Kibali. Her bright, modern clothes and bold demeanor were a stark contrast to the muted tones and humble postures of the villagers. Her laughter was louder, her gait more confident. She had come to visit her aunt, but her presence quickly became a topic of conversation. The village girls, curious and hungry for something different from their routine lives, found themselves drawn to her. Naira spoke of the city, of Bamako's bustling markets, the tall buildings, the music that spilled into the streets. She painted pictures of freedom and excitement, far removed from the daily chores and rituals of Kibali. At first, the elders watched from a distance, their brows furrowed in concern. Naira's stories and her city ways were a novelty, something to be observed but not feared. But the more she spoke, the more the village girls listened. And they didn't just listen, they began to follow her lead. Naira, with her city-born cunning, started meeting with traveling traders and men who passed through the village. She accepted gifts, fine fabrics, trinkets, coins, in exchange for her company. This behavior, foreign to the village's values, soon caught the attention of the younger girls. It wasn't long before whispers spread of secret meetings and small treasures passed from hand to hand in the shadows of Kibali's night. The village girls, once obedient and proud of their heritage, became restless. They saw in Naira a path to something new, something they hadn't imagined before. They began to meet men in secret, following Naira's example. What harm could it be, they thought, to enjoy a little of the world beyond Kibali? But with each meeting, with each secret exchange, the foundation of Kibali's traditions began to crack. The elders noticed the change. The once serene demeanor of the village girls had turned to one of rebellion and secrecy. Naira's influence was like a slow poison seeping through the veins of the community. The once harmonious rhythm of Kibali began to falter, and the elders realized that the new arrival had become a catalyst for change, an unwanted, dangerous change. The drought worsened. The sickness spread further, and the despair among the villagers grew deeper. The people of Kibali, who once stood tall and proud, now looked at their fields with hopeless eyes, and to their families with fear. In hushed tones, the villagers began to point fingers. Mothers blamed fathers, fathers blamed the weather, but soon enough, many started to blame Naira. She had come from the city, after all. She had brought with her not just tales of freedom, but temptations and perhaps a curse. Naira was not oblivious to the growing hostility. She could feel the weight of the villagers' stares and hear the whispers when she passed. She shrugged it off at first, continuing her nightly escapades and secret meetings. But the whispers became louder, the glares sharper. Even the young girls who had once been so fascinated by her began to withdraw, afraid of being caught up in the growing storm of disapproval. It wasn't long before the elders took action. They confronted Naira in her aunt's modest home, their faces hardened by the weeks of suffering and fear. They accused her of introducing behaviors that went against everything the village stood for, of bringing a curse upon their heads. Naira, initially defiant, denied any wrongdoing. She insisted that she had only been living as she always had. Was that a crime? But the elders would not be swayed. They pointed to the growing number of girls engaging in the same behavior, the increase in secret meetings, and the decline in respect for tradition. They saw in Naira a spark that had ignited a wildfire, one that could destroy everything they had worked so hard to preserve. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Naira began to feel a seed of doubt growing within her. Had her presence really caused this much harm? The elders decided that something drastic needed to be done. They decreed that Naira, to atone for the disruption she had caused, would need to undertake a pilgrimage to the sacred mountain, carrying offerings to appease the spirits. This was no small task. It was a journey fraught with danger and meant for someone who truly sought redemption. The village held its breath, waiting to see if Naira would accept this penance. As Naira prepared for the pilgrimage, a silence fell over Kibali. The elders, still reeling from the confirmation of their worst fears, found themselves gripped by a sense of urgency. If the spirits were not appeased soon, the drought and the sickness could consume them all. The weight of their responsibility pressed heavily on their shoulders. Each passing day without rain felt like a countdown to their demise. Meetings became more frequent and tempers flared easily. The elders argued among themselves about the right course of action. Some believed that the pilgrimage was enough, that Naira's sacrifice would turn the tide and cleanse their village of its newfound sins. Others were not so sure. They feared that the damage ran deeper than they could see, that Naira had already poisoned the well beyond repair. Meanwhile, the village girls, who had once seen Nira as a figure of liberation, were caught in a storm of their own making. They had tasted the forbidden fruits of the outside world, and now they felt the sting of their elders' judgment. Some returned to their homes, filled with guilt and fear, while others remained defiant, believing that what they had done was not wrong, but rather a pursuit of freedom. The village was divided, and the tension in the air was palpable. Nira, for her part, felt the burden of what was to come. As she packed her bags and gathered the offerings for the pilgrimage, she could not help but feel the eyes of the entire village upon her. She had come to Kibali for a simple visit, and now she found herself at the center of its most significant crisis in decades. She wondered if the spirits would see her heart, see the sincerity in her actions, or if they would only see the missteps that had led to this point. The day of Nira's departure arrived with a sky as clear as crystal, but carrying a weight that was anything but light. Villagers gathered at the edge of Kibali to see her off, their faces a mixture of hope, skepticism, and fear. Naira, standing at the foot of the path that led to the sacred mountain, could feel the expectations pressing down on her shoulders. She knew this journey would be more than a physical test. It would be a journey into her own soul. She took her first steps, feeling the rocky earth beneath her feet, and she did not look back. The path was long and winding, and the ascent steep, but it was not the physical exhaustion that weighed on Naira's heart. It was the memories, the whispers, the accusations, and the glances of contempt. Each step felt like a reckoning, forcing her to confront the consequences of her actions. As she climbed, the land around her began to change. The air grew thinner and the vegetation sparser. She passed through forests of gnarled trees and over ridges where the wind howled like a lonely spirit. Naira's mind was filled with the tales of her youth, of spirits that guarded these lands and watched over the villagers. She had never given much thought to them before. Now she felt as though they were watching her every move. The night fell, and Naira set up a small camp. Under the stars, she prayed for guidance. For the first time, she truly thought about the pain she had caused, not just to the elders, but to the girls who had followed her lead. She realized that they were now paying a price they had not fully understood. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she whispered an apology to the wind, hoping it would carry her words to the ears of the spirits. As dawn broke, Naira continued her journey, now with a renewed sense of purpose. She had made mistakes and she knew it. But now, she was committed to making things right, to doing whatever it took to save Kibali. Naira continued up the mountain, each step heavier than the last, both from the climb and the growing realization of her own culpability. She began to experience visions, vague at first, like distant whispers, but growing clearer with each hour that passed. She saw images of Kibali as it once was, vibrant, filled with laughter and song. Then the images darkened. She saw the young girls, their heads hung in shame, the fields withering, and the sickness spreading like a shadow. One vision struck her like a knife, herself, standing in the village square surrounded by the young girls of Kibali. She saw how they looked up to her, saw the awe in their eyes. She hadn't noticed it before, but now it was painfully clear. She had become a beacon for their desires, their longing for something different, and she had led them down a dangerous path. Naira fell to her knees, the vision fading as she cried out to the spirits. "I see now," she shouted. "I see the damage I have done. I see the path I've carved in the hearts of these girls. Forgive me. Let me be the one to bear this burden." Reaching the peak, Naira found the sacred altar, a simple stone platform surrounded by ancient carvings overlooked by the sky above. She placed the offerings, a bundle of harvested grains, a small vial of water, and a necklace her mother had given her when she was a child. She hesitated with the necklace. It was her most cherished possession, a piece of home she had carried through the years, but she knew this sacrifice had to be personal, meaningful. With trembling hands, she laid it upon the altar and began the incantation she had been taught by her aunt. She spoke each word carefully, letting them rise into the air like a fragile melody. As the last word left her lips, the wind picked up, swirling around her, lifting her hair and stirring the dry leaves at her feet. She waited, eyes closed, heart pounding. Minutes passed. The air grew thick with tension. Then slowly the sky began to change. Clouds gathered, dark and heavy, and a cool breeze swept through. For the first time in months, the scent of rain filled the air. A single drop fell on Naira's forehead and she opened her eyes. The rain began to pour, soft at first, then in a torrential downpour. She fell to her knees, tears mixing with the rain, a weight lifting from her heart. Nira descended the mountain slowly, drenched but feeling lighter than she had in weeks. As she neared Kibali, she could see the villagers waiting, eyes wide with hope and anxiety. When she stepped into the village square, the rain following her, a collective sigh seemed to rise from the crowd. The elders approached, solemn and watchful. The head elder stepped forward and spoke. "You have done well, Nira, but the spirits demand more. You must stay with us for 10 years, help us heal what has been broken, and restore the old ways." Nira nodded, her heart heavy but resolute. She knew now that she had a part to play in Kibali's healing, and she was ready to accept the consequences of her actions fully. The days that followed were filled with hard work and gradual recovery. The rains nourished the cracked earth, and green shoots began to sprout where there had only been dust. The sickness that had plagued the village receded, and the air was filled with a sense of hope. Nira worked alongside the villagers, earning their trust and slowly rebuilding the bonds that had been broken. She taught the young girls to find balance, to understand that freedom did not mean abandoning one's roots. She became a bridge between the old and the new, showing that traditions could be honored without rejecting the desire for change. As she watched the village thrive again, Naira knew her journey was far from over, but she felt at peace for the first time in a long while. Kibali had survived its darkest days, and with Nira's guidance, it looked toward a future that embraced both the wisdom of the past and the promise of the unknown. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Make sure to turn on notifications so you won't miss the next exciting chapter. Thanks, and see you in the next tale.